Major Lindsay and Africa presents Bouncing Back, Conversations about Resilience for Lawyers.
Welcome to Bouncing Back, Resilience for Lawyers. This podcast is brought to you by Major Lindsay and Africa, the global leader in legal search and legal consulting. I am your host, Rebecca Glatzer, and I am a managing director in the associate practice group at Major Lindsay and Africa. In this podcast series, you'll hear me speak to successful professionals about the hiccups, bumps, bruises, and setbacks they've experienced in their careers and personal lives, and how ultimately they bounce back from those experiences to flourish. Today, my guest is Jason Carter. Jason is currently a law partner at Bondurant, Nixon & Elmore, one of Atlanta's most respected law firms, where he represents clients in high-stakes trial and appellate business litigation. From 2010 to 2015, Jason served in the Georgia State Senate, and he was the 2014 Democratic nominee for governor of Georgia. Jason has been named to Georgia Trend's list of 100 most influential Georgians and has consistently been recognized as a super lawyer in Atlanta magazine. Jason has received numerous other awards for his legal work and community service, including the Anti-Defamation League's Stuart Eisenstadt Award for his work defending voting rights. Jason currently chairs the Carter Center's Board of Trustees. The Carter Center is a non-governmental, non-for-profit organization founded in 1982 by former U.S. President Jimmy Carter to prevent and resolve worldwide conflicts, enhance freedom and democracy, and improve health around the world. So, Jason, let's get into it. In 2014, you were the Democratic nominee for governor of Georgia. You ran against Republican incumbent Governor Nathan Deal at the time, and you ultimately lost your bid for governor, receiving 44.9% of the vote. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Rebecca, number one. And number two, one of the things that led me into that experience and into politics in general is, sort of some difficulties that I was having trying to balance the practice of law with all the other things in my life. I had a real desire to be a lawyer and to be successful, but I also knew that wasn't the only thing in my life. I had small children at the time. I had, desires to go out and make an impact in the community, and I was trying to find a way to be successful in multiple different things at the same time, including being a father. And it was just hard, and I think a lot of people struggle with that. And so in that moment, I realized for me that moment sort of in the history of Georgia and in my life, that I needed to devote myself really fully to something. And I had been in the state Senate, and that was a time when we were excited. We were a little bit early in terms of Georgia really becoming a battleground state from a politics standpoint. But I got in it because I thought I could make a difference for people. There were 670,000 people that did not have health insurance because of a political decision that our governor made to not expand Medicaid. So the people of Georgia were paying to give health insurance to these 600,000 people, and then we were sending the money back to Washington without doing that. So I felt compelled to get engaged. But, as it may be interesting to your listeners, it grew in part out of, some real struggles in balancing my life as a lawyer.
That makes complete sense. I guess the sort of idea of let's do one thing and try to do it really well versus a bunch of different things and maybe some better than others. I assume you had the support of your wife and the rest of your family when you went into this. Was there any pushback from, whether that be wife or your dad or your grandfather, or was everybody kind of gung-ho about this?
I think everybody was gung-ho about it. Certainly at the beginning. It's a grueling process. Anyone who's ever run for office in a statewide campaign, and we had a lot of national attention, and we, had to raise millions and tens of millions of dollars to do it. And so it just takes 100% of your time. And in that way, by the end of the time, I think certainly my family was ready for the process to be over, for sure, because of how grueling it is. But no, it was a lot of support. And, not only from my family, but from my law practice, from the partners at my law firm, from the other lawyers that I had worked with over the years. I mean, in that way, running for office was a great example of sort of feeling support from so many different people, who really invested in my campaign. And now you feel like over the last 5 or 6 years, I've just been trying to pay that back, and you realize there's no possible way you can ever repay all of the outpouring that you received. But in that way, I felt very supported. Of course, it was unsuccessful, and we weren't able to sort of succeed there. So in one way, I guess the last job I tried to get, I failed. But it has had a great impact on my life and as a personal experience, and frankly as a lawyer.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, in the sense that I remember at the time attending some fundraisers on your behalf, and, the sort of buzz of, this is, if anyone's going to be able to flip Georgia, so to speak, this is the sort of drumbeat, right, of friends and people in the know, former President Jimmy Carter's son is going to do it, right? Because there's name recognition, and you had been in the state legislature for so long, and you're sort of a known entity. And so hopes were high. And so I'm curious about how you process the loss, you personally and the folks around you.
Well, so, we knew it was an uphill battle, and obviously it's sort of on some level a high-profile failure. But on another level, we know we really started this effort to really build an infrastructure in Georgia, to really transform Georgia, both from a dialogue standpoint. I mean, one of the things that I can look back on that race on and know is that the governor focused on the issues that we wanted to focus on. We focused on healthcare, focused on education, and we were able to advance the public dialogue. So you can find sort of good aspects of, good things to show for this failure. But also, on a personal level, I didn't have regrets about it. I felt like I did everything that I could, and that was really helpful. There's pluses and minuses to being recognized everywhere. Once in that race, we spent $10 million saying good things about me, and the other side spent almost twice that saying bad things about me. So everybody at least knew who I was, which is bad and good. Right.
Indeed. So related to that, I mean, you had a series of experiences prior to this gubernatorial race that I'm sure you feel kind of set you up to kind of be in good stead, win or lose. It sounds like you came into it kind of with the right attitude. This is either going to go well or great. And if it doesn't, I will go back to my law practice and a myriad of other things, including being a good husband and father. So you had a lot of things sort of in the background. It's not like all your eggs were in one basket, so to speak.
Right.
And I was curious, what experiences in your life prior to sort of set you up for being okay with running in such a high-profile race, having national, perhaps international eyes on you. That's not something, that's a hot box that not all of us are sort of prepared to be in. And I'm curious about, upon reflection, what you think sort of set you up for success in being in that space and sort of being okay whether it went your way or not.
That's a hard question, because on some level I kind of want to say, well, everything. I am who I am because of this sort of large number of experiences that I have had. But the way that I approached it is I knew what was the most important to me. And I literally woke up every morning when I was running for governor, and I thought, well, today is going to be really annoying for these 20 reasons. And I have a lot to do, and it's going to be exhausting, but there's 670,000 people that'll get health insurance if I win. And I knew that endeavor was worth it. And I knew that I felt like myself in the right place. Like I knew that I was spending my time on something that was compelling to me. And it was easy to wake up and do that. And because of that, and because I knew that I sort of did everything I could, I always knew I might not win, but I was doing my best to do it. And so, you got to be willing to fail, or else you'll never try to do anything great.
Yes.
And my family has done a lot of that, right? I mean, Jimmy Carter lost a big, huge presidential race. And what he's done since then, at least in a lot of people's eyes, certainly enough people's eyes, and certainly in his own, I think, view of himself, has been incredibly successful, you know? And so I think that's, you know, the examples of having setbacks not be true failures is abound.
Yes. Yeah. You've got some impressive folks in your family, not the least of which is your grandfather. I was going to ask you, speaking of family, and in reflecting on, again, the gubernatorial experience specifically, you have two young sons. And they're getting older by the minute. I keep looking at photos. Oh my gosh, I can't believe how old they are right now. What?
I do that every morning.
I'm sure you do. And as a stranger who doesn't see them every day, it's like, whoa, they grew a foot. And how long has it been since I've seen them last? But question about, what lessons would you take from the gubernatorial race specifically in that entire experience that you would share with your sons, going forward? If they would listen, that's a whole nother thing. But, if you were to think through, what takeaways could I share with these guys that would be useful life lessons for them?
Well, I honestly think, it is. It's like some people will always look at it as a big public failure. And they will think that. But I don't think anybody in my family looks at it like that. And my kids know why we did it. They know why it was worth it to give it a try. And they've also seen, me sort of, continue on. And I think sort of my standing in our community and my standing in the legal practice and my standing in the world was heightened because of that race in a host of ways. And the point is, I think, is you try to make sure that you're not doing it only for yourself. And if you are doing it for other people and you're doing it for sort of, quote, the right reasons, it's worth it to try big things. And I think, a lot of that fear of failure is one thing that motivates people, but sometimes it keeps people out of the arena. And you don't ever want to have your fear of failure be so great that it becomes a fear of trying.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think those are great lessons. Doing it for the right reasons, whatever it is that you may be, whatever endeavors you may be engaging in, and if you're doing it for the right reason, sort of knowing, okay, win or loss, fail or succeed, I tried, I got in the ring, and, I'm going to learn something from this experience. That's the essence of resilience, in short. You touched a little bit about your grandfather, and I know that his mom was something else, as we say down here. Also a resilient, pretty impressive woman. I'm interested, if you knew her when she was still alive, and if you had, kind of the nature of that relationship, and if there were lessons from her specifically. For the listening audience, Jason's great-grandmother Lillian entered the Peace Corps when she was 68, and spent a good bit of time after that in India, doing various things. She was a nurse by training. And that's just one example of a myriad of things that she did in her life that were incredibly impressive. I have a thing for feisty Southern women, Jason, since I consider myself one. So reading about her has been quite inspirational. I'm curious about the impact that she may have had, on your life view, and anybody else in your family that you think kind of set you up for success in your political endeavors and your legal endeavors and everything else.
Look, I think grandmama, we called her grandmama, right? Miss Lillian, everybody knew her. Grandmama, but grandmama would number one, I did know her, and she passed away when I was 8 or 9, but she definitely was the first person I ever heard use a bunch of words that I wasn't allowed to use. And she's very very feisty, very feisty in that way. But yeah, she turned 70 in the Peace Corps. And I think that experience infected my whole family. She was a little old lady from South Georgia, who had lived in a town with 600 people, and she left and went to India for 2.5 years almost, at a time when, she was writing letters home in the 60s. It's not like now where you go to the Peace Corps, which I did when I was in the Peace Corps, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the difference between when I went in the late 90s and when she went is she didn't have any real communication. It's not like she was on the internet keeping up with the Braves games. You know what I mean? It's like she was isolated.
Yes.
And
pre-internet.
So that pre-internet, pre-everything, just about, right? I mean, but anyway, her experience, I think, infected my whole family with this idea that, you can go anywhere and help people, and that it matters to help people all the way around the world. And part of that sort of resilience is when my grandfather left, was involuntarily retired from the White House. She was standing there, he was in his 50s, and she said, well, I turned 70 in the Peace Corps. What are you going to do? And I think that really motivated him to do all the stuff.
Yes. Because, people, President Clinton, President Obama kind of hold up your grandfather as, this is what post-presidency should look like, right? You're not done. You don't just go retire away somewhere and keep all your thoughts and your value to yourself. And it's cool to hear that your great grandma may have had something to do with that. I love it. I think that's great. You mentioned your own time in the Peace Corps. Tell me a little bit about that and, kind of the takeaway from that experience.
Well, she certainly, Grandmama clearly inspired my family to believe that would be a good idea, right? And I graduated from Duke, and I had, a lot of options of what I wanted to do, but my grandfather and others were basically just like, look, go to the Peace Corps and figure out who you are. And the great thing about the Peace Corps, I was in South Africa when Mandela was the president, so it was an amazing moment in history to be there. Just at the end of apartheid, we were working in schools, and I was the only white person for 30 miles where I lived, and I, had these incredible experiences. My Zulu is great; it's like my best party trick. But the real experience was about the people who live in these communities and don't have any of the resources that we have or the material stuff that we have, who still just drive so much change and so much improvement in their communities that it's unbelievable. And to me, the understanding and the sort of that people are pretty much the same everywhere, that they all want, a better life for their kids and to make sure that their communities are good and have what they deserve. It's super inspiring. And certainly the people that I met in the Peace Corps are as inspiring to me as my grandfather who won the Nobel Peace Prize,
Right. Absolutely. And I would imagine, sort of reflecting on that experience and reading some of your book. I haven't made it all the way through, full confession, but, it had to be sort of eye-opening, right? Because, you go from, playing in the rose garden at grandpa's house, going to, that experience, having, Duke is a kind of heralded place, a private school, very fancy pants, if you will, going into certain circles, but at the same time, it sounds like there's this element of grounding that was also kind of, I don't want to say beat into you, a theme of your life. Right. And I would imagine that probably influenced kind of the, again, the way you view things. And then you go to South Africa. And to your point, maybe there was internet there. Was that the beginnings of, did you have internet access?
I'll have to tell you that I want to talk about grounding and all these bigger topics too, but I will say, yeah, we had internet, but I had to take my computer to this like little dirt hut that had the one phone line, and I would plug it in and I would dial up, and then I would upload all my emails and download all my other emails, and then I would go back like 8 miles to my house. So I had internet access, but it was like that. Yeah,
not in the form that we are used to, right? Not in the form that rich Americans who live in 2020 are used to, indeed.
Frankly, in the village where I lived, everybody's got a smartphone. I mean, so the world is different everywhere. Even in Liberia, some of the poorest places in the world, people are on Facebook getting their news, and so the world is different. But from a grounded standpoint, and as you were saying before, I think one of the things about my family and certainly my grandparents is, they came from this tiny town of 600 people and, went on to do all these incredible things, but they never thought they were better than anybody. They never thought that if you weren't, educated, that you didn't have a chance to do something, or they never thought that if you didn't belong to some club, or if you did, that it made a difference. And that was really important for us forever. And that sort of anti-elite idea probably got him in trouble in Washington, but it certainly helped, to your point, be grounded. And I've had a lot of other experiences that have grounded me, including, the losses that we've already talked about.
Yeah. What else, when you think of an instance of grounding, we'll call it, humbling grounding, anything that sort of just pops in your, what are maybe the top one or two experiences that made you go, reminder, I put my pants on like everybody else.
I'll tell you right now, I was walking, it was my first day back at my law office after running for governor. And again, I had lost, but I had a lot of people support me and gotten millions of votes and done a bunch of other things. And so certainly within like my building, I work in a big, used to when I went to work pre-COVID, I worked in a, 50-story office building in Atlanta, and I got in the elevator and like a couple people from a big law firm in town were like, "Oh, hey, Jason, I voted for you, blah, blah, blah." I was feeling important. I walked down the street, senior partners from another big law firm in Atlanta. I said, "Jason, oh, hey, looked great, blah, blah, blah." I said, "Oh, thanks." And I was really feeling important, and I was getting ready to walk into this restaurant, and I was just like, man, I wonder how many people looking at these windows of this restaurant, I wonder how many people sitting there recognize me. Like, I'm feeling like a big, important guy. And I hit this step, I had my hands in my pockets, and I fell literally flat on my face and like scraped my arm real bad and like sort of tumbled and thought, well, there's the universe talking to me. And my first thought was, God, I hope none of these people recognize me. So I walked in and went to the bathroom and cleaned the blood off of me and had my lunch. But anyway, there's things like that happen all the time. I mean, and no matter who you think you are, how important you think you are, to your point, most people don't care.
Exactly. It sort of reminds me of, kids too. They will humble you. They don't really, they want their own that. And I'm sure your sons are like, "Daddy." They're not interested in candidate Carter or lawyer Carter. They're interested in Daddy and making sure that you feed them and take care of their needs and give them attention and love. So that can be humbling as well.
Look, spouses will keep you grounded too. At least mine does.
Amen to that. I agree with you on that one as well from my own personal experience. Jason, given that we have the last few minutes here, what advice would you give to junior associates who are experiencing setbacks in their careers and personal lives for the first time? Perhaps they were too junior, too young to experience the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, 2010. And so for the first time in their adult lives, they're experiencing layoffs and furloughs, uncertainty in their careers and personal lives. What advice would you give them?
I think, first of all, everybody has gone through something like that in their life. And if they haven't really lived. But I also have to say that every time I was ever going through a tough time and someone told me, "Oh, you'll be better for it," I always thought, screw you. This is hard.
Right.
And I never really appreciated anybody's advice at those times. And so I just think that, hindsight, knowing that you're going to get through it and that there is something on the other side is the most important thing. And, for me, and the type of struggles that we all go through and that we've all had, it is in fact the kind of thing that makes you a human being. Everybody goes through it. And frankly, the thing that I have learned is I've seen a lot of people who look like they've never had a failure. A lot of people who are super successful lawyers who have, made a ton of money, who've done everything, and they hate their lives. And that's way more sad to me and way more of a failure than somebody who's struggling to get ahead and is finding it difficult, because that person at least is being true to who they are, trying to figure out what it is that they want to be, how they can plug in to the world. And that's going to be better than somebody even who's become a super successful lawyer and still hates their life, because that person has nowhere to turn.
Right. Amen. And life's short, isn't it? And to be happy and to have tried is certainly a life worth living, versus someone who keeps it safe and is miserable. As a legal recruiter, I talk to a lot of those unhappy people on a regular basis. I completely understand what you mean. I think that's great. Being true to yourself, recognizing that you have to take risks to actually get anything worth having in life. That's really, really good advice. Any last words you'd like to share with our listening audience before we wrap things up?
Oh, just stick with it. One of the things that I think is the people that you have around you that respect you and are there for you, that's the real sign of success, is who are you surrounding yourself with and who is it that you're relying on? And to me, realizing sort of the depth of support that I've had from a lot of different places, it's incredibly valuable. And, the best thing I've ever done, and probably haven't done it enough, is, the people that are younger than me who are aspiring lawyers, who are interested or aspiring politicians or both, my ability to help them and to spend some time with them, seek out mentors and seek out those supporters, and that'll eventually turn into, the kind of law practice that you want, the kind of life that you want. Those human connections are everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Your advice is stellar. This has been chock full of takeaways, and I think people will really get a lot out of it. I hope you and your family stay healthy and well and safe over the next few weeks. And thank you again for your time, Jason.
Thank you for listening to Bouncing Back, Resilience for Lawyers. Join us next time for another story about thriving after overcoming challenges. You can find Bouncing Back and other programming for lawyers on MLA's Legal Talk Network.